Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking the International Institute for Counter-Terrorism and its founder, Professor Boaz Genor, for bringing us together to share our thoughts on one of the most complex issues of our time, as well as to share information and practices on our resolute and continued contribution to the joint global efforts in countering the threat of violent extremism and terrorism. I'm also pleased to return for the fourth time to Israel, a country which has shown unparalleled resolve and has managed to build a solid, pluralistic and open society, despite the turbulent environment in the region. Being at the same time a country that has been exposed to various acts of terrorism, we think that we have a lot to discuss and learn here. With Israel, we share not only the identity of a country on the meeting points, both geographically and culturally, of regions, but also the fact of being small, located in challenging security environments within which, by themselves, provide incentives for the ecosystem of terrorism and related phenomena. But most importantly, our two countries and peoples share a common history of struggle, solidarity, and of resilience of human spirit during the dark days of World War II, when Albanians, as opposed to other Europeans at the time, saved thousands of Jewish lives, overlooking ethnic or religious difference and being guided instead by what is noblest of the human spirit. This spirit of human solidarity must continue to guide us when faced with sinister threats such as terrorism, extremism, and any kind of totalitarian ideology. Dear colleagues, in the course of the last years, the world has gone through extreme levels of violent extremism and terrorism. They have undermined international peace and security, have inflicted unbearable suffering to individuals, groups, and communities, have further exacerbated conflicts, and have destabilized entire regions, thus becoming a serious obstacle to normal life and development. With events in Syria and Iraq and the emergence of the so-called ISIL, this complex global challenge has reached unprecedented levels. Albania has been continuously involved in addressing these global challenges. We immediately joined the global coalition, and we're happy to be able to concretely help the government of Iraq in its efforts. We have also introduced new law pursuant to landmark UN Security Council resolution that address the threat of terrorism and violent extremism. We strengthened our legal framework and empowered our law enforcement agencies. We have devoted special attention to various critical aspects, such as countering and financing of terrorism, improving border security, regional and international exchange of intelligence and information, as well as judicial cooperation. In addition, we built a good record in investigating and prosecuting terrorism-related crimes under terrorism-related laws. In the course of the last 2 years, we have all made remarkable progress in defeating ISIL in Iraq and Syria. The caliphate is a thing of the past, and there is a drastic decrease of the number of foreign terrorist fighters and acts of terrorism. Yet, reports indicate that thousands of fighters are still engaged militarily, and that ISIL threat remains a serious threat. It continues to plan and inspire attacks to radicalize and recruit. Countering terrorism is not and will not be easy, but there is no alternative, and no one must not feel discouraged. Just as the terrorist networks are transnational, so too must be our cooperation. We must strengthen border security and information sharing and devote vigorous efforts to the reintegration of returning and reallocating foreign terrorist fighters and their families. These becomes even more important in line of in light of foreign terrorist fighters returning and relocating from battlefield. With Israel in particular, close cooperation and coordination between our national intelligence and security agencies have proved fundamental. Thanks to the serious cooperation with our Israeli counterparts and other partners, we managed to successfully thwart a dangerous terrorist plot against the Israeli soccer team playing in Albania. In addition to the core threat, but this is not the reason why we win in football against Israel. In addition to the core threat of terrorism emanating from ISIL being located in the Mediterranean, we also face a broad range of unprecedented and diffused new security challenges which may create a conducive environment to terrorism and extremism, such as migration, increase of transnational organized crime and weak rule of law, extremist and disruptive ideologies, lack of perspective, development and connectivity for the young people of our region or our regions. In the face of these challenges, forging new partnerships as well as strengthening cooperation with neighbors and existing allies is critical for our national security and that of our immediate environment. As a NATO member and an EU candidate country, Albania works closely with a large number of other partners at bilateral, regional and European level, and not least within multilateral platforms to address driving and conducive forces for terrorism and related phenomena. Thus, our contribution as an ally to the collective efforts in fighting illegal migration in the Mediterranean is significant. Since November 2016, Albania is part of NATO's maritime mission in the Aegean in order to help use Frontex to stop migration smuggling. In this context, our collaboration with Italy is an exemplary case of solidarity and close partnership between two Mediterranean countries. Only last week, we decided to lend a helpful hand and respond to the Italian authorities' call to provide shelter in our country to 20 Eritreans fleeing war and blocked for days overboard in Catania. We recognized early on that we must work regionally with our immediate neighbors. Albania included terrorism and violent extremism in the regional agenda of the Western Balkans during our chairmanship in office of Southeast European Cooperation Process back in 2015. Therefore, regional cooperation on countering violent extremism in Southeast Europe has only enhanced over the past years, and we now have a full-fledged network of national coordinators of countering violent extremism. We have established a regional center for coordinating actions in the area of countering violent extremism, and we are working with a number of partners from European Union such as Netherlands and UK until Brexit, as well as with new partners from Middle East such as Jordan, in sharing experiences and creating better knowledge of the context of radicalization and extremism. As part of our strategic partnership with the United States, we have now a structured cooperation in the area of data sharing and cooperation between our intelligence. In the area of asylum seekers and organized crime, we are working very closely with a number of law enforcing agencies from member states, as well as such as UK, Germany, Italy, and Netherlands. Dear colleagues, we all know that no one is a born terrorist, and violent behavior is not inscribed in our genes or national psyche. Therefore, understanding the drivers of violent extremism and terrorism is of a paramount importance. Experience has shown that various factors, such as lack of opportunity, poverty, social injustice, and marginalization, do play a part in fomenting violence and may quickly transform grievances into extremism and radicalization, like we have seen happen in many parts of the world. It is therefore of paramount importance to prioritize preventive measures by addressing drivers that favor or lead to violent extremism that fuels terrorism. Prevention, as the first line of defense, is a vital investment for international peace and security. Here, I would like to mention three key factors: economic development, connectivity, and education. A sharper focus on the development security nexus in our region and between our regions in the Mediterranean Adriatic space remains critical. Through an ambitious economic reform program, the Albanian government is focusing on improving the living standards and the future of our generations. Yet, and this is my second point, being small countries and in close vicinity to the European Union, we know that improving national economy is not enough. We need to do more in terms of connectivity with the rest of the region and the European Union. In the Western Balkans, we are trying hard to remove political obstacles to the economic integration of our region. Thirdly, we must do whatever is needed to disrupt the link between radicalization and terrorism by properly addressing the various and complex issues in the environments in which terrorism acts are nourished. We must adopt a whole of society approach by engaging with civil society, community and religious leaders, and certainly youth. Experience has taught us that in order to be successful in our efforts, we cannot rely only on prosecution, but need to devote serious efforts to communication and education, as well in order to counter terrorist narratives, engage with other communities, and strengthen social cohesion. It is our view that among the various tools at our disposal, education remains key for building resilience to dangerous influences. Information and the development of critical thinking mean empowering our children and youth to understand the world and its complexities and leave no place to social or religion disrupting narratives, which, as we know, fuel radicalization that leads to terrorism. To this end, we have developed additional curricula for students to learn more about religion. We are training our teachers to strengthen discussions aimed at respecting differences and promoting religious liberties and highlight the benefits of social cohesion to combat extremist narratives, xenophobia, and hate speech. We are trying to establish a better relationship between schools and community so as to better involve important stakeholders such as families and community leaders. We value very highly the introduction of the chapter on the Holocaust in Albania in the history text of the Israeli schools, describing the contribution of Albanians to the salvation of Jews during Second World War II. As the late Shimon Peres noted to Prime Minister Edi Rama 3 years ago during our visit here in Israel, smallness and greatness nowadays are not measured by the size of the land or the number of the people. It is measured by the values and education of a country. In this context, we must use and improve digital connectivity between our young people with a view to protect them from extremist ideologies. We must use this weapon called technology to emancipate and liberate, as opposed to creating new different forms of exclusion, xenophobia, ethnic nationalism, extremist behavior, and so on. It is a double-edged knife, and we must learn how to use it for the good and the resilience of our societies. In Albania, we have a particularly precious national asset to preserve and further develop: our century-long spirit of tolerance, religious harmony, and respect. It has been transmitted generation after generation from our ancestors, and it continues to this day. Nothing should come to harm it. While we see religious harmony and understanding as a matter of national security, We think it is also shown an example of a society that has been able to find the best way to foster strong society bonds, build resilience, and capable to resist the sirens of discord and hatred. We are making the best out of our traditional culture of tolerance and interreligious harmony in order to prevent radicalization of our young people. It was this reality, this climate of coexistence and cooperation between different kinds of religions, which prompted Pope Francis to praise Albania by the following words, with which I wish to close my address today. What is happening in Albania shows through that peaceful and fruitful coexistence between people and communities with different religious affiliations is not only desirable, but possible and realistic. This is something of value which needs to be protected and nourished each day by providing an education which respects differences and particular identities, so that dialogue and cooperation for the good of all may be promoted and strengthened. It is a gift which we need to implore from God in prayer. Thank you very much.